high-ranking world leaders are finally making a power move against Iran, the nation that for years has tried to instill fear in the Middle East using oil, militias, naval pressure, and a parallel financial system. This Thursday, April 30, 2026, the United States Treasury announced sanctions against 35 individuals and entities accused of operating the parallel Iranian banking architecture. After Iran's escalation against the Gulf, patience has run out. The Gulf Cooperation Council, which brings together Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, rejected Iran's attempt to control the Strait of Hormuz and charge fees to ships. The message coming from the Gulf and Washington is direct. Tehran is being surrounded where it hurts the most, in its finances, oil, and the routes that keep the regime standing. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information and the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. Milson Alves, setting the standard for credibility. The most symbolic event came from the United Arab Emirates. The nation decided to leave OPEC and OPEC Plus effective from May 1st. It's not just a technical choice about oil production. It's a significant political gesture because it breaks a constraint that limited Abu Dhabi and weakens an organization where Iran still had some room to breathe. It's simple. The Emirates no longer want to be stuck at a table where Tehran also sits. For decades, Iran used loopholes in trade, the banking system, and shell companies to evade sanctions. When one door closed in Western banks, another remained open in the Gulf. The problem for Tehran is that this door is now starting to close. The United States Treasury announced sanctions against individuals and entities accused of operating Iran's parallel banking architecture. According to Washington, this network helped the regime receive money from illicit oil sales, purchase sensitive components, and finance armed allies in the region. That's where the pressure intensifies. Iran is not facing just a military threat. It faces an economic war of attrition that tries to cut off the regime's lifeline without relying solely on bombs. The target is not just a ship, a port, or a base. The target is the structure that allows the regime to sell oil, hide money, move resources, and sustain its influence beyond its borders. The Emirates play a significant role in this shift because Dubai and Abu Dhabi have become centers of trade, finance, logistics, and energy. That's why, for years, networks linked to Iran found space to move money, open companies, hide owners, and circumvent businesses. What used to go unnoticed is now being targeted. After Iran's escalation against the Gulf, patience has run out. The reaction was not limited to Abu Dhabi. The Gulf Cooperation Council, which brings together Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, rejected Iran's attempt to control the Strait of Hormuz and charge fees to ships. The position was presented at a meeting in Jeddah. The message was tough. The Gulf does not accept that Tehran turns one of the planet's most important routes into a tool of blackmail. The Strait of Hormuz is the point where the world understands the size of the problem. A vital part of the oil and gas traded on the planet passes through there. When Iran closes, threatens, or controls this passage, it doesn't just pressure its neighbors, it puts pressure on families, businesses, governments, and markets in several regions. That's why the reaction came quickly. No one wants to see a global route treated as the property of a regime in crisis. The recent data shows the damage. Reuters reported that traffic in Hormuz dropped to very low levels, with only about 6 ships passing through in 24 hours. While, before the war, the normal was something between 125 and 140 daily crossings. This drop shows that the crisis is not just talk. It has already affected maritime insurance, oil prices, logistics, and the fears of companies that depend on that route. At the same time, the United States is seeking international support to reopen Hormuz and keep pressure on Iran. Washington also warned that payments of fees imposed by Tehran could result in sanctions. This threat is serious because it affects any company, ship, or entity that accepts funding to finance Iranian control of the passage. In practice, Trump is trying to turn economic pressure into a wall that's hard to cross. The exit of the Emirates from OPEC also changes the oil equation. Goldman Sachs analysts pointed out that the decision creates a risk of increased supply in the medium term, because Abu Dhabi gains more freedom to produce without having to follow the group's quotas. Reuters also highlighted that the immediate effect tends to be limited because instability in Hormuz is still holding back exports. Even so, in the long run, the message is tough for Tehran. The Gulf is looking for ways to reduce its dependence on the rules that supported the old OPEC game. The Emirates already have an important alternative route, the Habshan Fujairah pipeline, which carries oil to the Gulf of Oman outside the most sensitive point of limited, estimated at about 1.5 to 1.8 million barrels per day, but it shows where things are headed. The region wants to survive without being held hostage by Iran's grip on the strait. This decision has a profound political dimension. Iran has bet for years that it could intimidate its neighbors and at the same time use their markets to keep money flowing. Now, this contradiction is taking its toll. If Tehran threatens the Gulf closes loopholes. If Tehran tries to control the sea, the neighbors look for routes, alliances, and sanctions. If Tehran uses hidden companies to finance its power apparatus, Washington follows the money. The United States operation against cryptocurrencies linked to Iran reinforces this scenario. The US Treasury announced the freezing of $344 million in digital assets associated with Iranian networks. This shows that the crackdown is not limited to traditional banks. It also targets digital wallets, virtual currencies, and modern mechanisms used to evade the monitored financial system. Inside Iran, the problem becomes even more serious. A regime that depends on exporting oil, accessing hard currency, and maintaining hidden trade networks suffers when these three things are attacked at the same time. If the oil doesn't get out, revenue drops. If the money doesn't circulate, the elites lose their room to maneuver. If the shell companies are exposed, the regime loses its channels. Trump appears in this scenario with a clear strategy: maintain the blockade and force Tehran to accept real limits on the nuclear program. In recent statements, he said that Iran can seek dialogue if it wants, but made it clear that the pressure will continue as long as there is no agreement. He also said that Vladimir Putin does not want to see Iran with a nuclear weapon. This statement carries weight because it shows that even Moscow, Tehran's strategic partner on several fronts, does not want to see a nuclear Iran out of control. The Iranian regime tries to respond by saying that it still controls the game, but the facts are moving in another direction. The Gulf leaders reject fees in Hormuz, the Emirates leave OPEC, and the United States Treasury targets shadow banks, companies, and cryptocurrencies. Maritime traffic drops, the energy market is on alert, and pressure over the nuclear issue returns to the center of the conversation. The most dangerous thing for Tehran is that the reaction now comes from several sides at the same time. It's not an isolated measure. It's a combination of sanction, blockade, energy disruption, diplomatic response, and regional reorganization. Iran built its strength by exploiting divisions, but now it sees rivals and wary partners moving to limit its room for maneuver. The big shift is that the Gulf seems less willing to tolerate the cost of quietly living alongside Iran. The region has realized that the threat is not only in Tehran's statements, but also in the maritime routes, hidden accounts, front companies, funded militias, and oil used as a political weapon. That's why the response targets exactly these points. In the short term, the crisis can still raise prices and create instability. The UAE's exit from OPEC doesn't immediately solve the Strait of Hormuz bottleneck, but in the medium and long term, it opens a new phase. Gulf nations seeking more autonomy, European states tightening the Iranian financial system, and Iran seeing its survival network being dismantled piece by piece. In the end, the power move against Iran shows that fear is starting to shift sides. For years, Tehran tried to make the Gulf and the world think twice at every step. Now, it's the Gulf leaders, the United States, and the global market that are imposing costs on the regime. What's at stake is simple: to take control of oil, illicit money, and blackmail over Hormuz out of Iranian hands. And that's exactly where Iran feels the hardest blow. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves news community.